But if you're able to understand this principle, how significant it is, you can say it then becomes allowing, receiving, letting things be. Then you realize you can actually be aware. You can sit with the busy mind, not be bothered by it. You don't have to make your mind calm. You can be calm within the busyness if you don't let it disturb you. You can be equanimous, you can be tranquil with the busyness of mind. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So last time I explained a bit about very fundamental Buddhist principle, the principle of conditional causality, which, while it is a very significant aspect of the Buddhist teachings, I mean, probably the most important, it was the Buddha's realization of conditional causality, which resulted in his awakening. But it's a little bit of a dry topic. But it does kind of go through all of the Buddhist teachings, especially it manifests mostly in the principle of karma, action and result. But in Buddhist terms, it's intentional actions give associated results. And the intention part, of course, is the will, volition, which is a fundamental aspect of self. So what it means is that self-generated actions give associated results which generate a self. It's like a feedback loop. And one of the, karma is very popular it's well known in Buddhist circles. Even today, even you look in the dictionary where you find karma is mentioned. You see the Sanskrit version of it, karma. But usually it's explained as fate. But in the Buddhist terms, it's not deterministic. It's conditional. The actions are conditional, the results are conditional. That allows us some leeway. If our actions determine all of our results, all of our experiences, there's no way to be enlightened then. You're a prisoner of your actions, previous actions, which many of us didn't have too much control over. But because everything is conditional, well, there still is a principle there. There is conditioning influences, but they are open to change to some degree. And this is, of course, the whole purpose of spiritual practice. We try to change the kind of momentum, the conditioning that we are born with. You can say, in this lifetime, we just say from the time of birth, but this is also in the Buddhist tradition that this comes from past lives too. But who knows? Unless you have very good samadhi, you won't know about your past life. So we just say this life. And many different influences in this life. Many different conditions come together. Perhaps if you think back of, how did I end up here? Who would have ever at that school, who would ever have in your yearbook, who would ever have wrote, oh, my career move is into the monastery, a Buddhist monastery in Thailand. One of the monks, he went to a reunion of a school in America. He just happened to be visiting, and it was a reunion, so he went along to this reunion, and he was voted to have the most unusual occupation of any of the students, a Buddhist monk in Thailand. It's not exactly on the curriculum. I don't know if you need academic program or technical program or whatever it was, secretarial program or something. What does it need to be a monk? Everything. Yes. You got to be a technician and a secretary and yes, and an intellectual to be able to study. And anyway, but there's another. Most people think of karma as literally action. Especially in our Western world, we're very active, so most people see it as something very aggressive. Not always aggressive, but I mean it is action, doing something. But there's another aspect of action, of karma, which is very significant in spiritual practice, and maybe poetically I could say it's the action of no action. Doesn't it sound poetic? What does it mean? Basically, it's pointing out another aspect of action, the action of letting go, for example. Usually don't include, most people don't include letting go as part of action. It's like, letting go is like giving up, not acting, right? But, most situations, at least in the beginning anyway, letting go does require some effort because we're so programmed, conditioned to jump in and do something. For example, when you're sitting there in meditation and certain thoughts come up, are you able to just step back and allow them? Or do you jump in and try and sort them out, try and figure them out, try and do something with them, try and stop them, try and cure them or something? I know it was one of my compulsions was always to sort of sort things out, try and sort my mind out, sort my thoughts out. It was, doubly frustrating because, the thoughts were there and then you try and sort them out and another thought goes in there. The thought to try and sort out the first thought. The thought to sort out the second thought about the first thought, and then before you know it, you got one heck of a headache. But sometimes it was, it was more useful just to allow those thoughts to be, and just recognizing, maybe, the first time you come and sit, beginning of the sitting, just observe the state of mind. Is the state of mind busy right now, or is it reasonably calm? If your mind is reasonably calm, you don't need to make it any calmer. More useful to engage in more investigation then. If your mind isn't so busy, gets spun off with conceptualizing and analyzing, you can just observe. Oh, there's this memory there, and I can see the memory triggers off that thought there, that train of thought, and to begin to understand how some of these patterns of thought develop, rather than immediately jumping in and trying to sort them out, trying to cure them. They're obviously there for a purpose. There's a condition behind it. They've been conditioned into your mind for some reason or other. And the way to be able to resolve it is to understand the cause. Understand the cause of suffering. Not just to solve the suffering, not to try and sort it out and try and cure it, but to understand the cause of the suffering. In order to understand the cause, one has to go to it. Try to observe this phenomena and where it's coming from. What's the source of it? What's the root of it? So you have to be able to open to it, allow it into your consciousness. However, within the limits of the ability to observe. the mind's too busy and it gets caught in too much analyzing and conceptualizing, then you're not looking at the cause, you're trying to figure it out. And figuring it out is not going to, you can maybe see it, you can maybe see a few traces, but most of the times the real root cause is something preconceptual. A lot of the sources of our suffering, I mean, we are actually preconceptual. Some of the psychologists even say that, some of the patterns of personality, they even begin in the womb. You're already in the womb when you have no conceptual brain yet, not even any sense faculties yet. The cells still pick up energies. So in the womb, the fetus can pick up whether there is an energy of acceptance of this fetus or there is a rejection of it. You pick up those kind of energies. So when soon as the child is born, they have what they call the primary patterning, whether this fetus feels welcomed into the world or threatened by the world. That already sets the tone for your whole personality then. Whether you're a glass half full person or a glass half empty person. Even though the fetus doesn't even know what a glass is, but already get the kind of background sense of your identity, being accepted and welcomed, or being rejected, your hopeless rejection. But some of those, those kind of patterns, of course, are not conceptual. So you can't think your way to find the source of it. You have to be able to open to that sensation, bodily sensations, for example. The cells in the body, they have those energies in them. They're inherent in them. They're conditioned into them. So you can pick them up, whether you feel attracted or repulsed by situations. So this is the action of non-action is initially, it's being a bit poetic, over poetic maybe, but because initially some of it is a more subtle action, if you like. Just something like I was reflecting upon renunciation. One of the factors of right aspiration, right intention in the Eightfold Path is renunciation. It's harmlessness, non-cruelty, and renunciation. And maybe in the beginning, most people think of renunciation as giving up something. Have to make an effort to like give away your stuff. But at a more subtler level, it is just being able to receive. Renunciation is being able to receive what's there, rather than having to push it away. Something like the teaching of letting go. I think it must have been, I guess it would be Ajahn Chah's teaching was the first time I came across the phrase letting go. I know for a lot of people it was quite a revelation in a way, because it was so much about spiritual practice. Spiritual practice was so much about getting something, getting concentration, getting samadhi, getting enlightened, getting wisdom. I went to Asia to get wisdom, not just let go. I can let go anywhere. But maybe I was letting go too much. My life was drifting around. Then to go to Asia to meditate, get some wisdom add to my life, give me some direction. I remember meeting somebody who was after the first book of Ajahn Chah's teachings was printed. I think it was after that first book that I met this person, this lay person. They were very excited about this book, and they were saying, "Oh, letting go, letting go, letting go, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful." And I said, You sound very attached to letting go, you know. Became ironic. You get attached to letting go. It's not really letting go, is it? But letting go is, has a really profound dimension to it. Yeah, but it does require at least some stability in spiritual practice. As letting go in the beginning, you just follow our old habits, don't we? Let go to our old habits. But once you have some stability in practice, mind is calm enough, one has some understanding of the principles, then you recognize, how much compulsion maybe we bring to our practice. We're always getting, and okay, so that it can take one so far. One of the Buddhist emphasis was on energy, for example, and striving. It was, it's one of the factors of awakening, energy. One of the factors. Only one of 7, though. In fact, in the factors of awakening, there's 3 energizing factors and 3 calming factors. And the energizing ones are investigation of Dhamma, energy, and joy. Yeah. So if you notice that your mind is dull, your body's lacking energy, then those are the factors you should be cultivating. Yeah. Investigation of Dhamma. Investigation of Dhamma can also have many varieties to it. It can be just reading the scriptures. It's one of the suggestions. If one feels sleepy and dull, is to, in the Buddhist time, they only could recite the scriptures. They didn't have books. But I think it was in the Visuddhimagga where they had books already. It was written in the 5th century AD. It was suggested that, when one feels drowsy and sleepy, then you light your candle, didn't have electricity then, and then you take out your scripture and you read passages. And sometimes it can give you a bit of energy, or, it can give you some encouragement, some faith, some energy. Be able to reflect upon the Dhamma. Ideally, you've memorized the more important passages, the Buddha's cardinal discourses. You recite that tonight. Yeah? One of the cardinal discourses you recite tonight. Britta chanting. Well, they're kind of inspiring, aren't they? If you speak Pali. If you know Pali. The eight triumphs of the Buddha, against Angulimala and the Nagagiri, the Lindagiri, the mad elephant. Anyway, you haven't read your scriptures yet. But sometimes reading about the life of the Buddha, for example, can inspire you. Other times, investigation of Dhamma is developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Investigating the sensations in the body, investigating the feelings, states of mind. It's an investigation which is non-conceptual. We're trying to observe directly, not just think about it. What's a feeling? Well, feel. That's all you have to do is feel. You know what a feeling is. And energy, of course, many different kinds of energy. There's many different, there's physical energy and mental energy, for example. And sometimes the Buddha really emphasized the practice of development of energy, striving and doing many hours of walking and sitting meditation and, sleeping less. But one has to be able to fine-tune it. Too much energy ends up in restlessness. Well, maybe you can just drive yourself to distraction. What's driving that energy? Is it our greed for realization or attainment or something? Or the development of joy, a sense of well-being? As it is said in the Metta Sutta, may I abide in well-being and freedom from affliction. Of course, the greatest joy comes from samadhi and insight into Dhamma. eventually. It can be rapturous when you have some perception of impermanence, for example. And then there is the calming factors: tranquility, equanimity, collectedness. Something like tranquility gets a bit subtle. When is it tranquility and when is it sleepiness, and dullness? What's real tranquility? Can you experience alertness within that tranquility, within that relaxation, for example, an alert relaxation? Or do you always need to push yourself? Equanimity is very subtle. To be equanimous, to be even-minded with all kinds of different sense impressions, not just the ones you like, but the ones you dislike. That was one of the in northeast Thailand, of course, the forest tradition was known to be what they call it the ascetic forest tradition. We don't say that normally in the West because asceticism is not so popular, but that's what it was in Thailand. And a lot of the monks got quite a bit of energy out of asceticism. The kind of main watchword was, eat little, sleep little, speak little. So when the monks would experiment with, reducing their intake of food and sleep and spend more time in solitude, but sometimes those kind of practices they also can create, you can say physical and psychological disturbances. People stop eating, for example. They can get also get hallucinations at the extreme. Don't sleep so much, start having visions and things, or having dreams in the daytime, daydreaming. But if your mind is clear enough, calm enough, then you can use those situations as part of your meditation. One has to know what is moderation too. And then collectedness, more and more focused attention. Usually they say, usually if you want to develop focused attention to some depth, it's helpful to have a guidance of a teacher, because a lot of strange phenomena can arise. As your mind gets more and more focused, just the fact you have more focus of mind, you have more power of mind. So if you aren't very emotionally stable, that power of mind can go in different ways. It can go into your paranoia or your fear, which you've been holding at bay in your normal level of consciousness. You hold your fear at bay. When the mind's focused, maybe it drops in there, and you get terrified then, not just frightened. But the whole practice of letting go, for example, also is very, very subtle. One of the scriptures, it says that one develops these qualities which is based upon letting go. Letting go, releasing. Vosaga, I think the word is in Pali, vosaga. So sometimes we develop some of these qualities, but we hang on to them. We make get a spiritual pride out of them. I have very good samadhi right now. I have very good, and mindfulness is very sharp right now. I'm very energetic, and you pat yourself on the back. But the point is, these are just qualities of mind, which don't belong to you. They aren't actually your property. One can put energy into the conditioning of them. See? When you understand the principle of conditional causality, that the certain conditions, add that to the causality principle, you'll cause certain results. So you give skillful conditions to the causal principle, and you get skillful results out of it. So you put some time and energy into developing focused attention, collectedness, and there'll be some results. Of course, you can't always say when. Depends a lot upon your conditioning. Before I was meditating, at university, kind of spinning my mind out with all kinds of information. So when I went to Sri Lanka to try and meditate, my head was just buzzing with all this information. Couldn't focus, especially on something as subtle as the breathing. I remember trying to do walking meditation, and I determined that I would, whenever I lost my focus, I would stop. I don't know how it took me 10 days before I could get to the end of the walking path without stopping. Every few steps, stop, lost a thought again. Another few steps, lost it again. But eventually, especially in this intense environment, in a meditation center, after 10 days, 2 weeks, gradually the mind did slow down to become more focused. Of course, it was usually only for brief moments because that old conditioning was very strong. As soon as there's a moment of calm, the mind thinks, oh, look at the mind's very calm. Isn't that wonderful? Blah, 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 and off again. But sometimes letting go is just allowing. I can say there's different stages of letting go. In the beginning, maybe there is a little bit of pushing away. For many people, they mistake letting go for pushing away. But if you're able to understand this principle, how significant it is, you can say it then becomes allowing, receiving, letting things be. Then you realize you can actually be aware. You can sit with the busy mind, not be bothered by it. You don't have to make your mind calm. You can be calm within the busyness if you don't let it disturb you. You can be equanimous, you can be tranquil with the busyness of mind. Sometimes, if it's not too important. And there's so many things we have little control over, really. And most people don't want to even acknowledge it. We usually have this sense, our ego informs us and encourages us to think that we have control over our life. I'm in control. I can control my destiny. But when you actually look around more carefully, you realize very little control over things. Can you control the weather? Can't control the weather, but you can control. You have some degree of control over your reaction to the weather. Yeah. What about certain moods that come over you? Can you just, automatically be cheerful? Maybe some people, they're good actors, maybe. But just being able to allow those moods, that's how we get able to see what their source is. Yeah. Trying to, being pretentious about being cheerful all the time, it's not going to work because you're still putting that on top of your fundamental uncheerfulness. Where does that come from? What's the basis of it? Until you can be really direct, honest with yourself, clear about yourself, find out what's the cause of lack of cheerfulness, of negativity, of anger, frustration, etc. Only by receiving them, acknowledging them, are we able to open to them and look into them and through them. What's behind it? It's all just a series of conditioned phenomena. And it's a bit like, I would say, an image I have is peeling back the onion, different layers of it. And the more layers you peel back, the more at peace you can be with those other layers outside. You realize it's only a layer. And so it's not the real onion itself, not the real essence. Just a covering, just a condition, we say. Yeah. Your moods, your reactions, they're just a condition. They're not the real nature of yourself, just a condition. And when you can really see that, let that go. And then may have a little bit of peace for a while, and then you notice, another condition, more subtle condition. The first, usually the first reactions, we have, emotions are these strong ones: greed, aversion, delusion, different kinds of aversion. But if you look at that, you can recognize, what's behind that? What's behind the aversion? There's some degree of hurt there, or sometimes there's a different manifestations of that aversion. Anger first, and then there's irritation or frustration or something behind that more subtler level. So you begin to see, as with increased mindfulness, collectedness, and wisdom. The wisdom is you don't get caught in those coarser conditions, as it were. Aversion, oh yeah, right, I've seen that. Once you've been able to see it, you're conscious of it, you let it go. Then there's the next level. What's behind that? And there's the irritation behind that, or a hurt behind that. Like some kind of aversions. It's just you react with aversion because some trigger has been set off of an old hurt. That old hurt gets re-triggered again. It's like a wound. Somebody pokes at it. But until you can see that, just a condition. Yeah, I know. Oh, be careful then. If you got a wound on your foot, be careful how you walk. But if you don't know that you have this particular wound, this vulnerability, then you just keep reacting again, without recognizing what the real cause is, what's the real source there. It's a matter of finding the careful balance. I mentioned there's, in karma, it means action, but it's not always activity. And in Buddhism, it's intentional actions, which are based upon the will. So most of the time, we identify with that will, consciously or unconsciously. Our will is ourself. I can will whatever I want. But that also can click into a certain degree of energy. Call it willpower. So we can be very willful in our spiritual practice. I notice a lot of Westerners are quite willful in their approach. You got to have it figured out. Why am I here? To get enlightened, okay, then I just go for it. So the will clicks in, and then if you're very willful, you can kind of force some kind of experience. Like people developing concentration, many people can do that. If they have a very strong will, they can get concentrated. But it's a very, very heavy kind. It's not very natural. They can sit there for hours, focusing on the breath. But as soon as they let go of the breath, the mind's off again. There's one of our friends in Switzerland, and he was a very committed meditator, I could say, maybe. But he also had a very, very, busy mind. So he'd book for a 3-month retreat. He'd take time off work, save his holidays up, get 3 months holiday to go off to a meditation center for 3 months. So he'd really meditate. And of course, he did get some experiences of calm. But then when he came back to work again, his friends noticed he was terribly depressed. Got very, very depressed when he came back to work. Isn't concentration supposed to lead to insight, to wisdom, to, a lightness of soul, of heart? But he got really depressed. Then he came on a retreat at the Monastery in Switzerland. And after, we began the retreat, I think it was a winter retreat, which is 3 months. Yeah? And the first few weeks, we usually devote to concentration exercises, just sitting and walking, focus on breathing. And after a few weeks, or a week or so, or 10 days, I said, okay, now the mind is reasonably calm. You can just drop the meditation object. And he got a real shock because he realized he couldn't do that. He couldn't drop the meditation object. And he told me that the first book he read on meditation said, to meditate means don't think. So he was trying all this time to stop thinking about not thinking. It took him usually a few months before he could do that. And then he got a month of peace, 2 months of peace maybe, came back to work, started thinking again, and got depressed. Meditation isn't about not thinking, it's understanding where thinking comes from. When you know what the nature of thinking is, big deal. It's okay. Yeah. You can recognize how you can use thinking, and when it's not necessary, a bunch of junk, drop it, let it go. But you aren't controlled by it. You don't have to turn it on or off. Sometimes it happens, okay. Just don't feed it, don't energize it. Back to the breath, back to the breath, back to the breath, and thinking you'll get tired of being ignored and go find somebody else to bother. But just being able to recognize, when it's suitable to let go. Yeah. Sometimes it is useful to act. Other times we can say to not engage in action, not any doing, just allowing nature of body and mind to be as it is. Of course, in the process, hopefully, we have enough mindfulness, awareness, to be able to transform that into wisdom. Mindfulness, wisdom. It's the wisdom that comes from seeing clearly, not just following the old moods or trying to analyze it, but seeing it as it really is. So what's the problem with thinking? Thinking has some very useful has some usefulness sometimes. Thinking isn't the enemy. It's our relationship to the thinking which is a problem. It's like self is not a problem if you know what the nature of self is. Self is just a condition, a necessary condition too, to maintain our sanity. That we get so obsessed with it, we keep building up the sense of self and thinking we're king of the world and control everything, and it doesn't work that way, and then you crash and suffer for it. There's probably something you don't hear too much about in ordinary life about letting go, because for most people it just means laziness, letting go. Let it all hang out. It means going on a holiday. But the right time, the right place, and the right conditions. Some things it is helpful to engage with them. You try and be active in regard to them. Other times you have to be able to step back, disengage. Just like with the thoughts. You don't need to try and control them. You just kind of step back and disengage from them. The thoughts will kind of fade away by themselves, because you aren't giving them energy to be or not be, not pushing them away, not chasing after them. Even trying to push them away it's not going to be a resolution in the end. Just going to rebound again even stronger. Because you're still giving them energy. Push them away, you're giving them energy. But they just disengage from them, eventually run out of fuel, and they just fade out by themselves. So having this acknowledgement anyway of what is the engaging, what's the disengaging, what's the activating, what's the non-action in spiritual practice. We know what those are. We begin to recognize how to balance them, how to work with them, allowing or trying to engage, trying to unravel them, trying to investigate them, or to allow it to be, and then it'll fade away on its own terms. This requires a careful balancing. It's like talk about balancing the spiritual powers. Too much of one has a detrimental effect. Too much concentration, too much collectedness leads to kind of a dullness of mind, leads to lethargy and dullness. Too much energy leads to restlessness. I say too much faith, too much trust. Yeah, I mean, you end up kind of just believing unwisely. And then too much knowledge, too much information. You just stay with the intellectual or the conceptual level, not allow it to be a direct experience. And mindfulness watches over all of them. So just being able to recognize the place of both of these in our spiritual practice. It's not a matter of just pushing through, but not a matter of just letting go either, but balancing them out. So once we learn these lessons, feeling our way through it, and basically our practice begins to level out, even out. And then these factors of awakening, like I say, they don't belong to anybody. They're natural conditions of mind. Factors of awakening become part of our heritage, and part of a way of being. That the mind, you don't have to develop or create mindfulness, becomes part of our normal way of being. Being more mindful, being more collected, being more equanimous, tranquil, being more joyful, being more energetic. It becomes part of our way of being. Natural way of being, rather than something we have to just create, condition. So we develop these practices we see for ourselves. And then you can say the kind of the normal being a victim of their emotions and their moods, becomes more factors of awakening then. Become those factors themselves. So it's like, in a way, there's like a regeneration. Gets transformed into awakening through those factors. And that's an experience that each one of us can experience for ourselves. So, hopefully we'll be able to continue the practice and find out. It's up to each one of us to discover for ourselves. We each have our own journey to follow from our own particular experiences of mind and body. So, leave this for your contemplation this evening.